At some point in my life, I have wondered what it would be like to be a king, to have people serve under me, to command an army to do my bidding, to rule over my subjects with a graceful yet stern hand. What would that look like? Well, after reading The Adventures of Sinbad, I fear I was rather short-sighted and lacked the true understanding of what it meant to be king, and to have everyone depend on you for safety, food, shelter, and a standard of living fit to live a full and healthy life. In this video, we will go over why you should watch and read Manga The Adventures of Sinbad, which is a prequel based on Sinbad from the Magi series. Sinbad was born in Tison village, a village located somewhere within the Partavian Empire. Sinbad's birth was very special. His mere existence caused a shift in the destiny of the world. A singularity was born. A boy that could sway the tides of fate just by traversing through the world. A boy that could end up being the great change that the world needed, or the calamity that everyone feared. That was Sinbad. Sinbad's upbringing was for the most part normal. He lived with his mother Ezra and his father Bardar, and enjoyed his quiet days in Tison village. But then Darius appeared. Darius was a spy from an enemy nation, the Rem Empire. The way Darius came into the picture was that young Sinbad and his father were out and found him unconscious, and upon Darius waking up, he thanked Sinbad heavily, as he was the one that found him in the first place. But little did they know they had let an enemy fully infiltrate their home, and by extension the nation of Partavia. But Bardar, being the nice guy he is, he wants to help, but he made a mistake when he didn't question the origin of the man before him. Upon meeting Darius, you get a sense that he's kind and filled with passion, and somewhere along the line you seem to forget that he's an enemy of Partavia. Every night during his stay with Bardar and his family, he proceeds to tell Sinbad stories of the world, its dangers, its wonders, and how vast the world truly is. Through these stories that seem like fairy tales, Sinbad started to grow fond of the world outside of his village. You could now see the eyes of a child that was filled with excitement. Tison village seemed so small now in comparison to the stories that Darius told, but his enjoyment of such stories would come to an end. One day, Partavian soldiers came to the village looking for a spy. Upon realizing his situation, Darius quickly took Sinbad as hostage, and the kind travelling merchant that was Darius became the cold-blooded spy from the Rem Empire. After this, Bardar begins to beg for his son's life, and through some turn of events, Bardar sees an opportunity and stabs Darius in the chest. You could see how distraught Sinbad was after witnessing this traumatic event. Darius meant a lot to Sinbad, and watching the life leave his eyes could not have been easy. And unfortunately, the bad news did not simply stop with the death of a Rem spy. The punishment for harbouring a spy was to be sent to war, and Bardar had already been to war once, so he understood that war was not the answer. After seeing countless people killed in front of him, it was safe to say that Bardar was not a fan of war at all, and he never wanted anything to do with it ever again. However, the people of the village did not share Bardar's opinion about war not being the right way to move forward as people. Instead, the village branded Bardar as a traitor, even though he had already done more than most to serve his country and returned alive. He even denied a hefty reward from the empire to live a quiet life with his son and his wife. Bardar had thought everyone had gone delirious with war and fighting, yet to be sent to war was an honour. But Bardar's experience led him to beg the question, is war such a good thing? But it seemed the people from the village failed to understand this point, and Bardar showed them the ugly truth that is war, and he taught the village a lesson about wanting to send their family members to simply die for a cause that they do not fully understand. In the same vein, he was also imparting knowledge to his one and only son, Sinbad. I think he wanted his son to learn that the ugly truth of the world is, as men, you must fight, whether it be those who seek to hurt you or a pack of wolves looking for the next meal. Men fighting and dying for lost causes is commonplace in this world, and I believe it was at this very moment the leader of the Seven Seas Alliance was born. Sadly, Bardar died, and his belongings were sent back to his family. And by the way, this all happened within the very first episode of the anime series, which doesn't really cover too much of the manga. As Sinbad grew older, he grew up to be a very kind young man. He always looked out for people in his village, and his father would have been very proud of the young man Sinbad had become. But Sinbad had a fiery passion to leave and explore the world, and it was clear that Sinbad's dreams were on a magnitude that no one else could even begin to comprehend. The world had begun to shift. Dungeons started appearing from all over the place, and along with them, the mystical ones known as Magi started popping up as well. The Magi appeared to oversee this shift and choose who would dare to become king. For some context, Magi are magicians that are loved by the Ruh. Think of Ruh as chakra, the life energy that everyone and everything has. There is dark Ruh that comes from anger, sadness, hopelessness, and denying one's destiny, and there is white Ruh that supports the life of every living thing, and when people die, their ruh returns to the guidance, the giant flow of ruh that surrounds the world. It contains the very essence of the world and the spirits and energies that flow within it. The Magi can select a king's candidate, or anyone can become a dungeon capturer and obtain what's known as a metal vessel and become a king's candidate that way. The metal vessel signifies you have traversed the dungeon and passed all of its tests, as in each dungeon the great beings called Jinn resides within it, and this is essentially the only other way you can attain the power to become king without a Magi's approval. And it's exactly what it sounds like. The Magi can select someone that they think is worthy to become king and guide them to obtain power by attaining metal vessels in the dungeons. How they will become king is unknown. There is no blueprint on how to choose a king's candidate. The Magi simply chooses who they feel meets their criteria. Through some turn of events, Sinbad met Yunnan, a Magi that's usually secluded but for some reason began moving. After this meeting, Yunnan guided Sinbad to a dungeon to attain the power of Baal, effectively choosing Sinbad to be his king's candidate. After this, Sinbad would then be known as the first ever person to conquer a dungeon and attain the power waiting inside, and it would later on conquer many more. The Adventures of Sinbad details so many things about Sinbad's life that you don't get to learn in the anime series. You get to understand who he is as a person and what he had to go through to build his kingdom, Sindria, and the sacrifices that Sinbad believed were necessary for the realization of his dream, to rid the world of war and to create a nation that could change the very foundations of the world altogether. The title is such a fitting name because every arc is a journey to a far and unknown land, where danger awaits at every turn. But there are a good amount of times he eloquently reminds you of why he was chosen to be a king's candidate in the first place, and why he is a man blessed by destiny. What I love about this manga is that the story isn't this flat narrative where it shows Sinbad simply trying to establish a kingdom because he wants to. It takes its time walking you through his learning process of what it means to be a king, and slowly but surely you as the reader begin to understand the journey to being a king is not as glamorous as you may think. Despite the madness and possible depravity Sinbad faces, he continues to move forward. In my opinion, the reason Sinbad is so polarizing as a character is because of his duality. When watching the Magi series, it's extremely hard to tell if he's the good guy in all of this, even though all he shows us is good deeds. But you can't help but get a sense that he is hiding his true motives. Not that his intentions are intrinsically bad, but you can easily see that in the Magi series, you must not take Sinbad at face value. I believe Sinbad is a character that's capable of great good, but while reading the Adventures of Sinbad, you start to see that Sinbad may be capable of an even greater evil, which may not be immediately obvious when watching the Magi series. Even though Sinbad is a righteous young man, he still has these moments of blind arrogance, and to be honest, I don't blame him. Imagine being told you are special, that your destiny will one day be the driving force that propels the world in whatever way you choose. I mean, who wouldn't get a little big-headed? Well, it turns out that Sinbad was not only big-headed, but you start to see the selfishness and greed that was required for him to become a ruler, and one of the most powerful men on the planet. On his road to becoming king, Sinbad became drunk with his own destiny, to the point he thought that any adversary could not best him in a battle of wits or even strength. He believed his destiny was one of righteousness, and that his way of solving injustice was the only way to save the world from depravity. But it turns out that as Sinbad tried to save the world from madness, no one was aware of the dangerous mental toll this had on a young boy wanting to become king. To say that Sinbad went through a lot is an understatement. You will find throughout the manga, Sinbad is faced with impossible decisions that constantly get in the way of his goal, and he never disregards these tough decisions. Every hard decision Sinbad has to make kills him inside, but for the sake of founding the kingdom of Sindria, no price is too large. This manga shows you truly who the king of Sindria is, and you get a clear picture of Sinbad's ideology. Even at the end, you still don't know what he is thinking or what his true intentions are. Sinbad had gone through so much to the point where he was now a man worthy of the title king. But with Sinbad, I don't think it stops. When does the hunt for all-consuming power stop? When does his crusade for justice in the world stop? Until he rules over the world? Or destroys it while trying to conquer it and usher everyone into his new age of peace? Sinbad is more than willing to pull the trigger when necessary, and his duality of right and wrong and the use of evil for the greater good is what makes Sinbad such a polarizing character. He's arrogant, charismatic, sympathetic, he's a leader, and he's more than willing to stake his life for his ideals. In my opinion, Sinbad is a great man and an even greater king, but that radiance of his may be his downfall. I hope to see his development as a character in Magi, and you can tell his influence on the story will be a very strong one. Sinbad is not the only reason you should watch Magi. If you didn't know, Magi is actually loosely based on 1001 Nights, or more commonly known as the Arabian Nights, which is a collection of Middle Eastern folktales compiled in Arabic during the Islamic Golden Age. It includes stories like the 7 Voyages of Sinbad the Sailor, Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves, and Aladdin and the Magic Lamp. These stories have been sprinkled throughout my childhood, and a large amount of characters from these stories make an appearance in Magi, which I think is such an interesting take on these ancient tales. Shinobu Otaka adopted the Arabian Night theme so so much that the chapters in both the Adventures of Sinbad and the main Magi series are actually called Nights, not chapters. This is due to the mainframe story in the Arabian Nights regarding Lady Scheherazade. On the night of her marriage to a king, she begins to tell the king tales, but doesn't end them, and the king would call her back each night wanting to hear her tales again and again. And this continued for 1001 Nights, which shows the amount of research the author done, as this is not the only shout out to the Arabian Nights that can be found in either series. The landscapes are also reminiscent of ancient cultures. For example, in the Dark Continent there is a place called Heliohap, which is seemingly based off of Egypt, and the Rem Empire seems to be based on Rome. I believe the author tried to model what the other nations would look like during the golden age of Islam, and not only did the author succeed, but she also created an ancient landscape full of adventure and rich with history, which is an amazing experience to watch Sinbad traverse through. Now, one of my favourite parts of Magi is the power system. We already know that Ruh is like the energy in the world, and Magi is created from Ruh. Instead of the Ruh that exists everywhere, think of Magi as the energy within people. Instead of the Ruh that exists everywhere, Magi can be used to power metal vessels. A metal vessel is created when one captures a dungeon, and the all-powerful djinn at the end of that dungeon resides within an object, which is commonly something that the dungeon conqueror is fond of. Now, the extension of this power doesn't stop here. The power can extend into something called household vessels. Now, remember how people that enter dungeons and conquer them can be considered king's candidates? Well, a king's candidate can have household members, which is essentially the main metal vessel giving a fraction of its power to another person that is close with the dungeon conqueror, effectively allowing each king candidate to have generals for their future kingdom. These powers are so interesting because not only can anyone with Magi wield them and amplify the metal vessel's power, but they can even use something called a full-body djinn equip. This allows them to use magic of one type and fight as magical warriors with varying weapons, armor, and abilities. This small snippet of Magi's power system doesn't even go into the special case of Sinbad's magical ability, as that could ruin some plot points, but the magical system is so cool and it allows for such interesting combat due to different types of magicians and metal vessel users. I could literally talk all day about the power system and the djinn. At the end of the day, you still won't be able to truly grasp the wondrous nature of Magi without reading it, so do yourself a favor and read it, because I believe this journey is one every anime fan should experience.